Mhm.
So yeah, thank you. Thank you for taking the time out of your evening to speak with me. The Dawn Breaks Behind the Eyes is getting its, I think it's its theatrical world premiere
Mhm.
at FrightFest. How are you feeling about the screening?
Excited. I'm basically just curious because I don't know. It's not the type of film where I can be sure that it's going to be a crowd pleaser because it's a kind of a specific movie, I guess. So there's going to be some people who really enjoy it, but maybe some people who where it's not for them. I don't know. So that's why I'm just basically kind of curious, and yeah, it would be nice to see it on the big screen because I haven't seen it. I've only seen it on laptop screens, so that should be fun.
I mean, if you've only seen it on laptop, I think this is the main screen film, so this is going to be on the IMAX. So this is going to be I mean,
So,
their laptop's not even a pixel on the IMAX screen, so it's
so I hope I don't find anything that I didn't notice in the edit, and I'm like, oh no, on the big screen. Yeah, but I think it should be fine.
yeah, it should be fine. And I mean, for those that haven't had a chance to read up on the film yet, without giving too much away, what's the film about in a nutshell?
I think in a nutshell, you could say that it's a story about a relationship that's told in the backdrop of a set in the 60s Gothic horror story, I guess, without giving too much away. So yeah, it's basically a film about one relationship that's told maybe through different relationships, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, where did the idea come from? Because, like you say, it's not a sort of a typical sort of narrative. It's a very different thing. How did that idea come into being?
I think it started as kind of just this, like an atmosphere, I guess, like this idea of a couple that spends eternity together in a castle. So that was kind of the main idea, and then it kind of evolved through that. So then I kind of thought, okay, what would happen if this couple spends eternity in the castle, and they're kind of, I don't know, it's this decision that's set in stone that it's these two people, and now they have to kind of deal with it. And I don't know, you've seen the film, in the end, it kind of changed into something completely different. I would say that the script we actually shot had an entirely different component to it. Like the first cut of the film was actually twice as long. It was 2 hours and 20 minutes.
Oh,
So it
wow,
was kind of through the editing process that we had to, I don't know, rewrite the script a bit. So like one aspect that, as I mentioned, this couple that spent eternity, it kind of changed into something else in the edit. So that was kind of exciting, yeah, but also challenging.
well, I mean, they say that you write a film 3 times. You write it and then you write it again as you're filming it, and you write it again as you're editing it. And I guess would be a classic example of a film that adheres to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this has actually always been the case with my films, which I'm never sure if it's a good thing or not. But in the end, it's always, I think, the end result is always something that can't really be planned, which makes it kind of interesting for me, at least. So it's kind of, yeah, it's like a process. Yeah.
And I mean, the setting, the story, takes place in this, gorgeous sort of old world castle building. How did you discover it, and did that impact in any way on the story that you were telling?
The castle itself,
Mm.
this was actually kind of the main inspiration for the story, was that I knew of the castle before we wrote the script. So because this was actually through a friend of mine, my former flatmate. She kind of knew this young couple that owned the castle. So I had seen it over the last years, and after we shot my first feature film, I kind of wanted to do something that's set in one place, and I always wanted to do something in the castle. So I kind of had the basic idea, but then we went to visit the castle in October 2017, and then I don't know, I fell in love with the castle, of course. And the issue was that it was going to be sanitized, so they only had one date where we were able to shoot. So this was kind of one half a year later after. So in May 2018 we shot the film. So that means basically from October to May we had to do the whole process, like finish the scripts, do the casting, the whole production. So it was kind of on a tight schedule, which I kind of, in retrospect, I kind of like it, because if it's this quick time spent, then you get things done a lot more quickly. So that was, yeah, kind of a race against time. But so yeah, basically, since I knew the castle, it was also easier to write the script. So it's like, okay, there's a basement, there's like a hole in the ground, and all these things that I could incorporate into the story, and lots of animals that were present at the castle as well.
I was going to say, there's a lot of, there is a lot of animal, there's the noise of owls outside, there's, there's cats, there's uncomfortably spiders where you can sort of like hear their legs, like as they're like what that, I guess, was that, like you say, was that stuff that you found when you were there and like, this would be cool? Because I mean, I never understand how people get spiders and stuff in their films. Like, does a Spider-Man come to set, or do you just find one and shoot it?
I think in this case we just found one. This was on the last day of shooting where we just did mood shots, and so it was just the camera man and myself. So we were just hiding and waiting for the spider to come, and we shot it in 100 frames per second. So it's like super slow motion, so we could get that. But we also knew that there were like 3 peacocks kind of living in the surrounding at the castle. There were a lot of albino rabbits, so these I kind of knew before, and that's why I kind of was able to write them into the script. There were also wild hogs, which I couldn't incorporate because it didn't fit that into it. But most animals I was able to use.
Right. I mean, one of the things that I really enjoyed when I was watching it is sort of alongside the story progression, the music also seems to progress. It starts off initially, it's very piano heavy and very classical, and then it's sort of, I guess, sort of replicating this idea of a couple in eternity. It starts to move through different genres and different styles of music. So you get disco, you get some synth, you get some rock. Was this an intentional thing so that the as well as a visual journey, there's an audio journey as well?
Yeah, this kind of evolved in the process, but this was always the idea that the film in my head was always structured into these 3, I would say, not 3 acts in the classical narrative sense, but in these 3 stylish acts, I guess. And the one of them is of course heavily inspired by the 60s and 70s, by the music and psychedelic music we had. So in the first cut, I had a lot more, I would say, probably more well-known songs from that time, but after a while, with music licensing and stuff, it kind of I was able to use some of the more obscure songs. But this was kind of the idea that it also progresses with the visual elements, the soundtrack as well.
Yeah, and in a way, it almost pushes the story on further because music, the music that was made in the 60s and 70s, is still around today, and there's certain elements in there that still feel quite modern. So as much as this is a story that is sort of set in the one place, it does still manage to continue on in a way just through the music alone. You get the sensation that this is the story that could go on and on and on.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah, I'm happy that it has this effect.
I mean, there's a lot of strong imagery as well within the film. Where do those ideas come from? Are they something that when you sit down to write, the image pops into your head, or is it something that organically when you're on set going, what, I would like this to happen now?
For the most part, I think because I originally I'm a studied painter, so that's kind of what I enjoy most working in film is, of course, to kind of create these visuals. But I was very lucky to have a really competent team. So usually I had this idea, and then when the set is built, it looks a lot better than I could have imagined it. So it was kind of a mixture of both. And I know I always like giving the team a lot of creative freedom, so I kind of vaguely explain what I would like, and then they do something that's way better than I could have imagined.
I mean, that sort of leads me on to my next question. You do have this background as a painter. How does that background and that skill set help you as a director?
I think it's, in this case, I mean, it helps in like basic mise en scene and colors, how colors correspond, and I kind of had to teach myself to do the color grading, which I did for the film myself, which was really fun because it's kind of the closest I could get to painting, where I was like, okay, maybe a little bit of blue in the corner and things like this. And I think in general, I kind of enjoy with painting that you have an image and it creates an atmosphere. And I think that's what I enjoyed most with the films. I always like the atmospheric aspect. It's something it doesn't have to be cohesive in the narrative form. I mean, for some people it might, but I kind of enjoy it if the atmosphere alone is interesting enough that it kind of evokes different emotions for people.
I mean, were there any films in particular that you sort of looked to for inspiration when you were making it, or did you just perfectly, just make something for yourself?
There were, of course, a lot of. I mean, I'm a big fan of horror in general, of course, but also of the gothic horror subgenre. So, as I said, I had these 3 acts in mind, and on these 3 acts they correspond with, I would say, 3 movies that were kind of in a similar vein. I think the biggest influence is probably the Iron Rose from Jean Rollin, which is, I'm not sure if you've seen it. It's also set in a graveyard, and it's basically about a couple who get trapped in the graveyard. So the whole time they're kind of spending and fighting, and it's about the dynamic in the relationship that they have. So this was kind of the initial inspiration for the film that I had. And then for the, I don't know, second part, it kind of goes more into this, without spoiling too much, in this more 60s influence, like Psych Out, like movies like that, or Comments, The Trip, a bit of Hair, maybe even the musical. So it's kind of a bit over the top, but this was kind of the choice that I thought it would make sense to go in this direction, to not be in this too realistic 60s political set theme. And I also kind of, another film that I quite liked was from Fassbinder. He had a film called Chinese Roulette, which is also set in a castle where basically a married couple, they meet up with their mistress and mistresses at the castle, and they don't tell each other about it. So so they suddenly find themselves in the castle with 2 couples. So it's kind of this embarrassing situation, but it's also shot in a really beautiful way, and it has this interesting atmosphere that I quite liked, and also this really absurd sense of humor that I quite enjoyed.
I mean, there's, there are, like we said, several different elements to the film, and the cast all have almost like dual roles to play in a sense. So, how did you go around finding actors that not only could play sort of one version of a character, but several different versions?
Yeah, this was actually quite interesting, because it kind of fell and dropped with the more actors I cast, the more it kind of became clear how the dynamic between them should be. So Frederik von Lüttichau, he's the one who, I don't know if I can spoil it, he's from the beginning the actor you see, his name is Dieter in the movie, and he's actually a good friend of mine, a great actor that I've worked with many times. So I actually wrote the script with him in mind for that. And then for the other role, actually I only cast one person, which was Jeff Wilbush. So he was the only choice I had, and luckily he agreed to do it. And actually his counterpart, Eva, is his actual girlfriend in real life. So, and she's also she's a professional actress, and she's also a great actress. But I don't know, it was kind of interesting to have this dynamic, of course, them being an actual couple. So that kind of played into it. And Luisa, she's a theater actress that I kind of met through Frederik. So we did some casting, but it was also this organic thing that happened, that you meet this person, then it just happened to be a good fit.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely works. Like I say, they're all playing sort of various different roles at any given time. That must have been quite hard for you and them to sort of keep track of when you were filming.
Kind of, yeah, but luckily we were able to kind of shoot it in a sense that they were able to be in one character for many days in a row, and not to kind of switch in between takes and things like that.
I mean, whenever I'm sort of talking to people that have got films at FrightFest or whatever, they're inevitably sort of lower budget productions, which means a shorter shooting time. What was your shooting schedule, and how did you manage to work with that?
I think we had the castle for 23 days, and we shot 21 days of that. So, and we only were able to shoot at night, so it was kind of a really strange setting. So we were kind of outside of the rest of the world and sleeping during the day and awake at nights, kind of like vampires. And I remember we had initially planned to have one day off after the 6th day, but since we were behind on schedule, we kind of had to work through it. So I think we worked 2 weeks in a row before we had the first day off. And yeah, it was quite intense, especially the first 5 days, because this was the time where we had the most people on set, where we had the things that happened later in the movie, but it was kind of the most people who were participating. And so that was kind of wild and crazy. And then it got a bit more quiet after a while. So, and it was, I think everyone kind of got into the groove, so it was a bit easier to shoot the rest.
So this is your second feature film. Have you started work on the next one?
The one after this, not quite. I mean, I have 2 scripts that I'm currently working on, but I found it's interesting. But I think the more films, in my case, that I make, the harder it is to kind of decide what the next film is going to be, especially since this film will be, I don't know, the first that kind of gets more attention, I guess. So people already will have a sort of expectation what the next film would be. So the 2 films I'm currently writing, one is a bit similar to this one, and the other one is quite different. So I'm not sure if I should do something more unexpected for the next film or not. Maybe I do something completely different. So I haven't really decided what I want to do next. So, but yeah, at the moment I'm kind of focusing on getting this film out there, and then I'll see what comes next.
And I guess the sort of the final question would be, FrightFest attendees are sat at home working out what they're going to watch when they're going to get food and stuff. What are they going to experience with Dawn that they might not get from some of the other films that are in the lineup?
I think one aspect that I quite like about, or that I always try to incorporate in my films, is that it always kind of takes the viewers on a journey. So you kind of give up everything to the filmmakers, and you just kind of lean back, and then I think that it's a bit of an experience that I hope that it's entertaining, but it's also never predictable. So I kind of never want to make a film where at some point you're like, oh, I'm sure at the end this is going to happen. So I think this is the kind of film that you can't really predict in any sense. And I also think this was kind of my idea. I always thought initially, if the film ever gets a cinematic release, I always thought it would be the perfect film to release on Valentine's Day, because ideally it's the kind of film that you can take your partner with. For instance, if you yourself are like a fan of horror films, but your girlfriend or boyfriend isn't a fan, then it could still be a good film that both people could enjoy. And it's the first film that my mom enjoys as well, and she's not into horror films at all. So, so it's not just for genre fans.
It's passed the mum test.
Yeah, it has. I was kind of nervous about some scenes, but it was really nice to hear that she enjoyed it. Because usually when she watched my first feature film, she was like, "Oh yeah, it was interesting. Yeah, I didn't really understand much, but it was okay." And in this case, I could kind of hear out of it that she really did enjoy it, and she talked about the story, and I could sense that she really got something out of it. So that was really nice.
Well, I will wish you best of luck with the screening.
Yeah, thank you.